He raised his glass, smiled at his glowing bride, and then, with the whole reception watching, mocked me. And to my mother he sneered, who always tried her best, even if her best was never good enough. Laughter followed. Mine didn't. I had sold my late husband's watch, canceled my dental surgery, and borrowed against my retirement just to fund this lavish event. 31 years of sacrifice for this moment of public humiliation. That was when something broke inside me. I refused to be trampled on any longer. What Dylan didn't know was I paid for every damn chair, every crystal glass clinking in his smug little toast. And now he's going to learn that biting the hand that feeds you comes with a price. My name is Caroline Monroe, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I never imagined my son would use his wedding day, the day I sacrificed nearly everything to make happen, as a stage to humiliate me. But there, I was sitting at a round table, covered in soft ivory linens I had picked out myself, surrounded by people in tailored suits and glittering gowns, when Dylan raised his glass for a toast. At first, I was proud, thinking, maybe he'd finally acknowledge all I had done for him. My heart thudded in my chest, just waiting to burst with pride. But instead, his voice curled with sarcasm. To my mom, he began smiling. She tried her best. I mean, her lasagna was terrible. Her budgeting skills were even worse. And let's just say, her taste in clothes should have been a crime. People laughed, and yet he added with a smirk, "Here we are. Thanks, Mom. Couldn't have done it without you." They all laughed harder then. I didn't. I stared at him, glass in hand, smile frozen, like a mask cracking from the inside. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't lighthearted. It was a slap, a polished, rehearsed, public slap. My heart didn't sink. It snapped. He didn't mention how I worked 2 jobs to keep him fed, how I skipped my own birthday dinner for 3 years just so I could afford a new pair of cleats for him, how I sold my husband's watch, his father's last gift to me, to pay for that bar Dylan had insisted on having at the reception. I canceled my own surgery because he said, "It's just a little arthritis. You'll be fine, Mom." And I believed him. I believed he cared. The clinking of champagne glasses, the camera flashes, the twinkling lights above our heads, it all blurred. I sat there silent, invisible, erased, in front of 200 guests, most of whom I had paid for. No one looked at me, not even Dylan. I could hear my pulse in my ears, loud and hot. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. He didn't respect me. Not a little, not at all. I wasn't his hero. I was his punchline. And for the first time in my life, something inside me stirred that had been buried for too long. I refused to be trampled on any longer. Let them laugh. Let them toast. Because what Dylan didn't know, what no one in that damned banquet hall knew, was that I was the one who paid for this entire wedding. And I still held the receipts, the wire transfers, the vendor contacts, every single satin chair, every drop of wine, every petal on the floral arch. They all had my name on them, not his. And now he's going to learn what happens when the woman who raised you decides she's done being your doormat. My name is Caroline Monroe, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. When I brought Dylan home from the hospital, he was wrapped in a secondhand blue blanket I'd bought from a garage sale for $1. His tiny hands clenched the air eyes, blinking into the world, like he was already searching for something brighter. I held him against my chest in that cramped, one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Hendersonville, and I whispered, "I'll give you everything, baby. Everything I've got." And I meant it. After my husband passed, when Dylan was only 2, the weight of the world seemed to press harder. I was 27 and alone. No savings, no help, just a toddler and a mountain of bills. I took the first job I could find, cleaning motel rooms during the day, waiting tables at night. I'd come home so exhausted, my knees trembled. But the moment I saw Dylan's little face peeking through the window, I smiled, like I hadn't spent the last 14 hours bending over beds and dodging sleazy hands. When he got sick, bronchitis at 4, a nasty case of pneumonia at 9, I slept upright on hospital chairs, whispering lullabies through dry lips while praying the fevers would break. I remember once I walked to the pharmacy in freezing rain because I didn't have gas money. My shoes soaked through, and I got a cold that turned into bronchitis. Still, I didn't miss a single night beside his bed. I missed birthday parties. Not his, never his, but mine, my friends, even my sister's wedding. Dylan needed me. I skipped vacations, turned down dates, and stayed home every single Halloween just so I could make his costumes by hand. One year, he wanted to be a velociraptor. I didn't know how to sew, but I learned. Took me 3 nights and my only pair of scissors, but I made him that dinosaur tail. He won first place at school. He never said thank you, but I didn't mind then. I thought love didn't need thank yous. When he applied to college, I remember the proud tremble in my hands as we opened the acceptance letter together. He got into Chapel Hill. I cried. He didn't see it. He was already texting his girlfriend. I paid the first semester's tuition with a loan taken against the mobile home I was still trying to pay off. Never told him, just smiled and said, "You deserve the best." All the while, I kept telling myself, he'll see it one day. He'll grow up, and he'll understand what I gave up. The life I could have had, the woman I could have been. But that day never came. Instead, he grew colder, more entitled. Somewhere between college and that wedding stage, he became someone I didn't recognize, a version of himself that always expected more and offered less. And like a fool, I kept giving, because I remembered the baby in the blue blanket, the toddler who held my pinky like it was the whole world. I couldn't let that go. But now I see it. Every cut I bandaged, every meal I skipped, every hour I worked. Overtime, it was love. Yes, but it was also a ledger. One I never thought I'd need to open until that wedding. And now that I have, he's going to understand every line item of my devotion. Every dollar, every choice, every broken dream he stood on to reach his own. Looking back, the signs weren't subtle. They were blaring like sirens I chose to muffle with excuses. It started small, always does. He stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Caroline when his college friends were around. I laughed the first time, thinking it was just him trying to sound grown up. He's finding himself, I told my sister, when she raised an eyebrow. It's just a phase. Then came the eye rolls, the long drawn-out sighs, every time I asked about his life. If I offered advice, he waved it off. You wouldn't get it. He'd say things aren't like when you were young, as if the decades I'd lived were some dusty relic. But the worst part wasn't what he said. It was how he looked at me, like I was a burden he hadn't asked for, but was forced to carry anyway. Still, I swallowed it. When he forgot my birthday for the 3rd year in a row, I smiled through it and told him not to worry. "You've got a lot on your plate, sweetie," I said. He didn't even nod. When he left me waiting at a restaurant for over an hour, because he lost track of time, I paid the bill, boxed up his meal, and drove it to his apartment. I told myself he was tired, stressed, overwhelmed, anything but cruel. But cruelty doesn't always come with fangs. Sometimes it's dressed in indifference. And then came Amanda. The moment he brought her home, I knew. She barely looked at me. Her smile was tight, polite, and distant. During dinner, she corrected the way I pronounced quinoa and laughed when I said I still used a paper calendar. Dylan didn't defend me. He laughed louder. That was the first night I cried alone in the laundry room, stuffing towels into my mouth so he wouldn't hear. He stopped coming home for holidays. One Christmas, I made a full meal roast pie, even those sweet potatoes with marshmallows he used to love. He texted me at 3 p.m. to say they were going to Amanda's parents instead. No apology. Just next year, maybe. I boxed up the food and brought it to a shelter. I should have said something, drawn a line, demanded respect. But I didn't, because I thought love meant enduring. I thought patience would be rewarded. I thought if I held on long enough, the boy I raised would return, and all this frost would melt into gratitude. But all that happened was this. My silence became his permission. And by the time the wedding rolled around, I had already taught him how to treat me like an afterthought. That was my mistake, but it's one I'm done making. Because now I see love without respect is just submission. And the next chapter of my life won't be written in apologies or excuses. It will be written in boundaries and consequences. I didn't just pay for my son's wedding. I bled for it, quietly, invisibly, willingly. It started with a phone call. Dylan's voice was unusually sweet. "Hey, Mom. Amanda and I are thinking of doing something small. Well, not too small. Maybe a vineyard or a garden venue. Something classic and tasteful," he said, mimicking her words. I could hear her faintly in the background, directing the conversation like a producer off stage. "We'll keep it modest, nothing crazy." I smiled through the phone, pretending that offer of modesty hadn't already felt like a prelude to a favor. Then came the ask, "Would you be able to help financially?" It was phrased gently, almost guiltily, as if he didn't already assume I would. And of course, I said yes. Of course I did. Because for a moment, a desperate flicker of hope lit inside me. Maybe if I gave this gift, this beautiful, monumental gift, he'd finally see me again. Not as some outdated obligation, but as his mother, the woman who gave him life. I cashed out a small savings bond first. It barely covered the deposit on the venue. Then I dipped into my emergency fund, the one I kept hidden behind cleaning supplies under the sink. That covered Amanda's dream floral arrangements. She wanted peonies in November. They had to be imported. When that ran out, I sold my wedding ring. He never asked me where the money came from. I refinanced my mobile home. It wasn't much, but it bought them a live string quartet. I remember the broker saying, "You know, this isn't a smart move for someone your age." I just smiled. He didn't know what it was like to want your child's approval so badly you'd trade your own roof for it. I even pulled out my husband's old guitar from the closet, the one with his initials burned into the wood. Dylan had once begged to learn on it when he was 9. He'd forgotten about it, but I hadn't. I sold it to a collector in Georgia. It funded the tuxedo fittings. And finally, I maxed out every credit card I owned, 7 in total. The last charge was for the monogrammed cocktail napkins Amanda insisted on. "It's a detail people notice," she said. I smiled and nodded like a concierge. By the end of it all, I had poured in just over $38,000. Every cent accounted for. Every dime attached to something beautiful and temporary. Not once did Dylan ask how I was managing. Not once did he offer to help. He just sent links to vendors, forwarded invoices, replied with, "Can you take care of this?" I even booked my own hotel room near the venue because they'd already given their rooms to Amanda's family. Still, I told myself, this is your gift to them, your legacy. Let it go. I imagined Amanda crying with gratitude. I pictured Dylan hugging me at the reception and saying, "None of this would have happened without you, Mom." But instead, he stood beneath a twinkle-lit arbor in a $400 suit I paid for and used me as a punchline. All I got that day was a seat near the back beside a woman who thought I was the caterer. And that more than the money, more than the exhaustion, is what stung the most. I gave them everything they asked for, and they gave me silence. But they forgot something very important. In this fairy tale, I kept the receipts. From the moment Amanda stepped into our lives, I knew I was being slowly erased. She was polite, yes, but the kind of politeness that builds walls. A practiced smile, a careful tilt of the head, a perfectly manicured hand extended just enough to keep me at arm's length. She never said anything cruel, but cruelty doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in how someone doesn't look at you. The first time we met, I made my chicken pot pie. It was Dylan's favorite growing up. He used to beg for seconds, licking the spoon like a child, long after his teenage years. Amanda took one bite, smiled thinly, and said, "Oh, this is nostalgic." Then she barely touched it. Dylan didn't say a word. At Christmas, I knit her a scarf in soft plum yarn, her favorite color, according to Dylan. She opened it, blinked, and said, "Oh, handmade. That's thoughtful." Then she left it on the arm of the couch and wore a store-bought designer scarf the next day. Every interaction felt like a test I didn't know I was taking and always failed. She called me Caroline, never Mom, not even Mrs. Monroe. It didn't matter how often I welcomed her, offered help, or tried to connect. I was a formality to her, a transaction. The woman who raised the man she now owned. What hurt more than Amanda's indifference, though, was Dylan's complicity. I brought it up once gently. "She doesn't seem to like me very much," I said, half laughing, trying not to sound wounded. Dylan shrugged. "She's just private. You take things too personally, Mom." "No, I take things deeply, not personally." He never defended me. Not when Amanda rolled her eyes after I mispronounced a wine label. Not when she accidentally left me off the group family photo. Not even when she joked that Dylan had to undo all the emotional weirdness of his childhood. I was there when Dylan scraped his knee so hard the bone showed through. I was there when he threw up from anxiety the night before college interviews. I was the one who taught him to tie his tie when his father couldn't. And yet in Amanda's presence, I was just emotional weirdness. At the rehearsal dinner, she gave a speech thanking her parents for their unwavering support and generosity. She never mentioned me, not once. I had funded the entire event, booked the venue, coordinated the seating chart. But I wasn't even a line in her gratitude script. Still, I clapped. I smiled. I stayed quiet. Because I thought I could earn their love with patience. But here's what I know now. You can't earn love from people who believe they're above you. You can only exhaust yourself trying. I once read that you don't truly lose someone all at once. It happens in 1,000 small dismissals. Amanda never slammed a door. She just slowly closed it in my face, one cold smile at a time. And Dylan, he locked it. But what they don't know, what they never even bothered to ask, is that while they've been playing house, I've been watching, learning, planning. Because the woman they think they've pushed into the background, she owns the whole damn stage. After the toast, the one that cut deeper than any blade, I sat motionless, holding my champagne flute, like it might anchor me to reality. I could still hear the crowd chuckling. Not cruelly, maybe, but carelessly. That's how cruelty hides best. Behind just jokes, behind polite applause, behind good lighting and white tablecloths. Someone tapped my shoulder. That was funny. Huh. a man in a pale blue suit said. I forced a smile. I don't even know who he was. Probably a cousin of Amanda's. I wasn't introduced to most of the guests, even though I'd paid for half of them to eat lobster that night. I excused myself and made my way to the bar. I needed a glass of water, something to stop my hands from shaking. My stomach had twisted itself into a sailor's knot. I looked around for Dylan. I needed, I don't know, an apology, an explanation, a hug. I just needed my son to look me in the eye and say, I didn't mean it like that. Instead, I found him near the dance floor, laughing with Amanda's father and some of his groomsmen. I waited for a lull in the conversation and stepped forward. Dylan, I said softly. He turned, barely masking the irritation in his face. Hey, Mom, what's up? I hesitated. That toast? I started, my voice catching. Was that really necessary? He blinked like I was being unreasonable. Oh, come on. It was just a joke. Lighten up. A joke, I said, in front of everyone. That was, Jesus, Mom, he cut me off. Don't start. Please don't make this about you. I felt the words hit like a slap. Don't make this about you. I had spent 2 years making this about him. 2 years of financial sacrifice, emotional labor, and late-night phone calls with vendors to make sure this day went off without a hitch. I had funded this fantasy so fully that I didn't even have money left over for a proper dress. The blue satin gown I wore, I bought it on clearance and stitched the hem myself. But here he was, dismissing me like I was some needy guest, some nuisance who'd stumbled into his picture-perfect day. I just wanted to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Well, now's not the time, he snapped. Seriously, if you're going to get emotional, can we not do this here? That's when Amanda appeared. She looped her arm around his and tilted her head with mock concern. Everything okay? Yeah, Dylan said. Mom's just, being Mom. Amanda gave me that same cold smile. Well, if you need a break, the hotel has a quiet lounge on the 2nd floor. Might be good to take a breather. A breather. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them everything. How I had skipped medication this month to cover the extra floral charges, how I had lied to my sister about borrowing money, how I had sold the last thing my husband gave me. I wanted to pour it all out right there on that pristine dance floor and see if anyone still laughed. But I didn't, because in that moment, I realized the truth. They had already decided who I was, and no amount of explanation, no tidal wave of tears was going to change it. So I nodded, I smiled, and I turned around and walked away, heels clicking against tile spine, straighter than it had been in years, because I was done begging to be seen. What Dylan didn't realize was that I wasn't just walking away from that conversation. I was walking towards something far more powerful, control, and I was ready to use it. I don't remember much about how I got from the ballroom to the parking lot. Just the cold click of my heels on pavement, the warm echo of music behind glass, and the throb in my temples that pulsed with every step. When I reached my car, a beat-up silver sedan with rust around the trunk and receipts spilling from the glove compartment, I just sat. My hands trembled too much to put the key in the ignition. My throat felt tight, like a seatbelt had wrapped itself around my windpipe. Then it happened. Not the kind of sob you cry quietly into a pillow. No, this was the kind that claws its way out of your chest, raw animal shaking. My whole body folded over the steering wheel, fists clenched in my lap, as a sound tore out of me I didn't even recognize. A cry that had been building for years. I wept for the girl I once was, full of fire and dreams before motherhood swallowed her whole. I wept for the woman I became, who gave up dates and dresses, who missed out on travel, and love, and sleep, so her child could have the world. I wept for every time I stayed silent, every time I swallowed a hurtful comment, every birthday phone call that never came, every lukewarm hug, every forgotten thank you. And worst of all, I wept for the realization that he never really saw me. Dylan didn't just forget me. He chose to forget me, to reshape me into something small, a character in his origin story, someone to thank with an eye roll and discard with a joke. I cried until my breath came in hiccups, until I could barely see the windshield through my tears. And when the tears finally stopped, something settled inside me. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. There, under the pale flicker of a parking lot lamp, I remembered who I was before he needed me. I was strong. I had worked double shifts while nursing the flu. I had negotiated with landlords and credit card companies, with a baby in one arm and bills in the other. I had built a life with my bare hands and then handed it over, piece by piece, to Dylan. But I still had one thing left, my dignity. And by God, I was going to get it back. I wiped my face with the hem of my shawl, sat up, straightened my spine. Then I opened my purse and pulled out the blue wedding folder I had carried for 6 months. Inside were the contracts, the receipts, the email threads, the list of vendors I had coordinated. I had built this wedding, and I was going to unbuild it quietly, precisely, and with full control. Let Amanda keep her fake smile. Let Dylan keep his smug speech. But they were about to learn something I should have taught them long ago. You don't humiliate the woman who holds your world together, because when she walks away, it all falls apart. There's something almost poetic about hiding treasure in plain sight. For years, I let Dylan believe I was broke, not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I had to protect myself. From the moment he turned 18 and started treating my sacrifices like expectations, I knew if he thought I had money, it would change nothing except how fast he'd drain me. So when my mother passed and I inherited $326,000 from the sale of her land in the Blue Ridge foothills, I said nothing. I tucked it away in a high-interest trust account under my maiden name. Quiet, untouched, untouchable. That money wasn't for groceries or emergencies. It wasn't for a vacation or home repairs. It was my exit plan, the parachute I kept folded behind glass in case the storm ever turned lethal. And now, after that wedding, that storm had arrived. He never once asked how I was surviving. Not when I stopped going out to eat. Not when I sold my car and took the bus. Not when I wore the same coat for 5 winters in a row. He just assumed I was used to scraping by. That I enjoyed struggle. That's what made the betrayal burn even hotter. I had let him believe I had nothing, just to see if he'd still choose kindness. He didn't. He chose status, and his new wife, and his carefully curated Instagram-worthy life, where I didn't quite fit. But while they were posting posed engagement photos and arguing about centerpiece colors, I was quietly growing a fortune. My trust account now held over $410,000 with interest. Add to that the modest but stable annuity I'd set up for myself using some of the land profits, and I had something stronger than pride. Power! They thought I was weak because I was quiet. But I was quiet because I was watching, waiting, gathering every cold glance, every backhanded comment, every act of entitlement, like stones in my pocket. I didn't plan to throw them. I planned to build with them walls, boundaries of future where I no longer had to beg for scraps of love from my own child. I could have written Dylan a check for the whole wedding up front. I could have dazzled Amanda's parents, shown up in a sleek suit, bragged about my generational wealth like they do. But I stayed small on purpose, because I wanted to know who they were when they thought I had nothing left. Now I know, and now that they've revealed themselves, I get to reveal who I am too. Not the desperate mother begging for love, not the tired woman in the parking lot, but the quiet architect of their undoing. The following Monday, I made an appointment with my lawyer. Mr. Talbot had known me for years. He helped me file paperwork after my husband's death, managed the small estate, and once walked me through refinancing my home with all the patience of a saint. When I walked into his office that morning, he looked up from his desk with a warm smile and said, "Well now, Caroline, this is a surprise. Everything all right?" I returned his smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. Everything I said is finally going to be. We got down to business quickly. I handed him a yellow legal pad filled with notes in my handwriting, names, percentages, account numbers, and a very clear directive. At the top, Dylan Monroe is to receive nothing. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't question me. "You're sure?" he asked softly. "I'm sure," I said. I've already given him more than I could afford, and what he gave me in return was disrespect. Publicly, repeatedly. I won't fund a future for someone who's spent years dismantling mine. And so line by line, we rewrote everything. I removed Dylan as my primary beneficiary and replaced him with several organizations close to my heart: a local domestic violence shelter, the public library, and a nonprofit that provides scholarships to single mothers over 40. Then I created a clause. Should Dylan contest the will, he would automatically forfeit even the smallest bequest. Mr. Talbot called it an in terrorem clause, meant to keep the greedy at bay. Fitting. Next came my trust account. I gave Talbot instructions to divide the funds upon my death in equal parts between those same charities and to assign control of the annuity to an independent fiduciary. No loopholes, no access, nothing for Dylan to exploit. It felt like exhaling a breath I'd been holding for decades. Then came the final move. I had him draft a letter, sealed, dated to be delivered to Dylan only after my death. In it, I told him everything. The money I hid, the reasons I did, the love I gave, the respect I deserved, the line he crossed. It wasn't written in anger, it was written in truth. As I watched Talbot place that letter into an envelope and seal it with deliberate care, something shifted inside me. Not revenge release. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to Dylan. I was protecting myself. Before I left, Talbot stood and offered his hand. "I hope this gives you some peace, Caroline." I shook his hand firmly. "It gives me something better. It gives me my life back. Because the next time Dylan looks for me in a financial panic, he won't find a mother with open arms and a checkbook. He'll find silence and a legacy that bypassed him entirely." After the wedding, I did what Dylan expected least of me. I went silent. No dramatic confrontation. No pleading texts. No teary voicemails. Just nothing. For the first time since he was born, I didn't reach out. I didn't ask how he was. I didn't send leftovers in Tupperware or mail birthday cards with crisp $20 bills tucked inside. I stopped liking their social media posts, the ones where Amanda beamed in rented sunsets and Dylan stood beside her like a prized accessory. I didn't even flinch when they didn't call me after their honeymoon. It wasn't sulking, it was strategy. You see, Dylan had always expected my presence. Not just expected, counted on it. Counted on me to forgive, to fix, to be the woman who stitched things back together, no matter how often he shredded them. But not this time. This time, I let the silence grow roots. At first, he didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but told himself I'd come around like I always did. The silence stretched from 1 week to 2, then into a month. Autumn rolled in, and with it came the annual family barbecue I usually hosted. No invite came from him. None from me either. Halloween passed, then Thanksgiving. No call, no text, just filtered photos of Amanda's mother carving a turkey, while Dylan toasted wine in a house I'd never seen. A caption below read, "So grateful for real family." That one stung, but I didn't bite, because my silence wasn't passive. It was preparation. While he pretended I didn't exist, I combed through every financial thread, still connecting us. I closed the joint savings account he'd forgotten I had access to, the one I had once set up as emergency funds for Dylan's future. I rerouted my mailing address to a P.O. box. I even began looking into new living arrangements. Something smaller, quieter, closer to town. Somewhere peaceful. Somewhere mine. The truth was, for the first time in over 3 decades, I had started imagining a life without Dylan in it. And it wasn't lonely. It was liberating. There was no bitterness in my silence, only calculation. I wanted him to sit in that echo of absence. I wanted him to wonder, even if only for a second, why the woman he took for granted had disappeared without a sound. And most of all, I wanted him to feel the cost of neglect, because the next time he reached out, he wouldn't be met with warmth or money, or the same woman who used to cry in her car after being dismissed. He'd be met with someone else entirely, someone he taught me to become. There was one last string tying me to Dylan, and it was tucked inside a dusty manila folder, sealed and forgotten at the back of my filing cabinet. A college trust fund. Years ago, when Dylan graduated from Chapel Hill, I opened it in secret. I was working 3 shifts a week at the diner and doing part-time bookkeeping from home, but I still set aside a small portion of every paycheck. I wanted his children, my future grandchildren, to have something to fall back on, a chance, a cushion, a gift that said, "Even if I'm not here, I believe in you." It started as $50 a month, then $100, then more, as I took on side jobs and holiday hours. I never told Dylan, never even hinted. I wanted it to be a surprise, something that would show him I was still thinking ahead for his sake, still dreaming on his behalf, even when he didn't ask me to. But sitting at my kitchen table one morning in late November, sipping lukewarm coffee and reading the smug, grateful for real family caption on Amanda's latest social media post, I realized something with absolute clarity. I wasn't building a future. I was building a leash, and I had worn it for too long. I pulled out the folder. The trust had grown to just under $62,000, modest, but enough to help with college tuition or a down payment one day. I flipped through the papers, automatic deposit confirmations, quarterly interest reports, notarized setup forms. Each document whispered hope, but hope I had come to learn can be misplaced. Hope can rot into expectation, into obligation. So I made a call. The banker at the credit union remembered me. "Oh yes, Ms. Monroe. The Education Trust, still going strong. Would you like to update the beneficiary? Add another child." I paused. Then with a voice as even and clear as glass, I said, "No, I'd like to dissolve it." He hesitated. "Are you sure you've built something substantial here?" "I'm sure." That afternoon, I signed the paperwork and had the balance transferred to a local foundation that funds college scholarships for young women aging out of foster care, girls with no parents to call, no wedding invitations, no birthday texts, girls like me once. And as I clicked the final confirm button on the transaction, I felt no grief, no hesitation, just release. That money would do good now, real good. Not feed the ego of a man who wouldn't look me in the eye, but lift the dreams of girls who had never had someone fight for them. Dylan would never know the fund existed, but someday he might wonder why life keeps placing doors in front of others, while handing him locked ones. And maybe, just maybe, he'll realize he burned the bridge that once led to grace. The first call came 3 weeks after the wedding. I was trimming dead leaves from my peace lily when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, something I've gotten better at doing lately. When I finally listened, it was the florist, a chipper voice, with an edge of urgency asking if I had a forwarding contact for the groom. "I'm afraid we still haven't received payment for the final invoice," she said. We were told it had been handled in full. She wasn't wrong. It had been. By me. But the week after that cold encounter in the parking lot, after I made peace with the truth of who my son had become, I took a long look at the vendor contracts, every last one. Because here's the thing, no one teaches you about being the financial ghostwriter of someone else's fantasy. If your name is on the dotted line, you also hold the eraser. Every major charge had been structured with payment plans. I'd paid deposits, partial advances, but not everything. Amanda had insisted on the pay later packages because it's just easier to handle once the gifts come in. Fine. That meant I still had leverage, so I did what they never expected. I canceled my cards. Not one or two, all of them. The automatic withdrawals failed one after the other. I didn't respond to the vendor emails at first. I let the late notices pile up in their inboxes. Then I replied with polite messages. "I'm no longer responsible for this balance. Please contact the groom directly." And just like that, the fantasy started to fracture. The DJ company followed up next. Then the tent rental service. Then the boutique hotel that hosted Amanda's extended family, all asking the same question, who's going to pay? Dylan called me 2 days later. I let it ring 6 times before picking up. "Mom." His voice sounded thinner than usual, pressed. Listen, I've been getting a lot of calls about the wedding. They're saying things weren't paid." I stayed quiet. Weren't those supposed to be covered?" he asked, his voice already shifting into guilt-flavored irritation. "You thought wrong," I said calmly. There was a pause. Then, "Are you serious? You said you had it taken care of." "I did, until you stood in front of 200 people and decided to use me as a comedy routine." "Oh, come on, Mom. That wasn't even that bad. You're seriously doing this over a speech." "This isn't about the speech," I said. "It's about everything. And I'm done paying for people who mock me." He scoffed, as if the idea of consequences was foreign. "You're really going to leave us hanging like this?" I smiled into the phone. "You're married now, Dylan. It's time you learned what it costs to build a life without burning the hands that built yours." He was silent. Then he hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment and felt a strange peace bloom in my chest. Let the bills roll in. Let the fantasy crack. Because for the first time in our relationship, Dylan was learning that love is not a blank check, and mothers are not bottomless accounts of forgiveness. It was a gray Thursday when he showed up. I remember, because the clouds had been low all morning, heavy with the promise of rain. I was on my porch trimming the rosemary bush that had outgrown its pot when I heard the familiar scrape of tires on gravel. I didn't have to look up. I knew it was him. The door slammed harder than necessary. Mom, Dylan called. Not hey or can I come in? Just Mom, short-clipped, impatient. I stood, slowly wiped my hands on my gardening apron, and walked to the steps. He was already halfway up the path, his face tight with frustration. We need to talk, he said. I nodded. We do, but I'm not sure you'll like what I have to say. He ignored that. Vendors are threatening to sue me. The hotel sent me a letter. The florist, the tent company, the photographer. They're all saying payments bounced. I tilted my head, and his eyes widened, offended. And you said you'd pay for everything. No, I said calmly. I said I would help pay, which I did. Then I reconsidered, after you humiliated me at your wedding. Dylan threw his arms in the air. It was a joke. No, Dylan, I said, voice sharpening. It was the final straw. It was you telling the entire world that I was laughable, disposable, and I will not spend another cent to fund my own erasure. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. Look, I'm sorry. Okay. But it wasn't really an apology. Not the kind that reaches the heart. It was flat begrudging, like a man trying to pay a fine, not earn forgiveness. I stared at him. Do you even know what you're apologizing for? He blinked. For hurting your feelings, I guess. I almost laughed. Almost. No, Dylan. You're apologizing because things got inconvenient. Because suddenly the gravy train stopped, and now you're stuck with reality. That's not fair. No, I cut in. What wasn't fair was the way you stood in front of our family, our friends, and mocked me. What wasn't fair was the way you let Amanda treat me like an unpaid intern in your lives. What wasn't fair was how you took my sacrifices as owed. He looked down. He didn't argue. And for once, he had no defense. Do you know I canceled my surgery to pay for your flower arrangements? I asked. That I sold my husband's watch for your champagne toast. You toasted to me with money I pulled from my own pain. He looked up slowly, guilt creeping behind his eyes now. I didn't know, he said quietly. You never told me. I shouldn't have needed to. He sat down on the porch step, like all the air had gone out of him. I let the silence stretch. I wasn't here to soothe him anymore. That part of our relationship had ended the day he used my name for a laugh. Finally, he asked, Is it really over us? I sat beside him but left space. It's not over, I said. But it's changed. I've changed. And if you want to be in my life, you'll do so with respect, not expectation. He didn't respond, just nodded slowly like a man realizing too late he's misplaced something irreplaceable. As he got up to leave, I added softly, You're going to learn that real apologies come with action. Not pressure, not pity, but change. And as the rain finally began to fall, I watched my son walk back to his car, soaked not just by weather, but by the weight of consequence. The second time Dylan came by, he didn't storm up the path. He walked like a man who wasn't sure if the door would open, a man who'd finally realized that silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means goodbye is being prepared quietly behind the scenes. I let him in. We sat in the living room, him on the edge of the couch, me in my usual chair, by the window, the one with the sun-bleached arms, and the throw pillow that still smelled faintly of lavender. For a while, neither of us spoke, just the sound of the clock ticking on the mantel and the creak of old wood shifting beneath our weight. Then I said it. All my life, I began slowly. I thought that love meant giving everything until there was nothing left. He looked up, eyes tired, shoulders rounded. The confident man from the wedding had vanished. I gave you my sleep, Dylan, my meals, my health, my time. I worked until my fingers cracked and my back spasmed. I skipped doctor's appointments to buy you new cleats. I gave up relationships because no one could come second to you. I gave up parts of myself you never even knew existed. He swallowed hard. And you know what the hardest part was? I asked. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the public humiliation. It was realizing that you didn't see me at all. Not as a person, not as a mother, not as a woman who gave her entire life to lift yours. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. I'm not finished. He closed it. You didn't just hurt me with that speech, Dylan. You confirmed every doubt I'd swallowed for years. Every time I wondered if you loved me, or just the things I did for you. Every time I brushed off the dismissiveness The eye rolls the forgotten birthdays. I told myself, he's just busy. He's just young. He'll understand one day. I leaned forward. But you didn't understand. And worse, you didn't care to. You married a woman who treats me like staff, and instead of defending me, you joined her. His eyes were glassy now, but I didn't stop. I canceled my surgery. I sold your father's last gift to me. I suffered in silence so you could shine, and you repaid me with mockery, with silence, with absence. Well, Dylan, now you'll know what it feels like to be forgotten. I took a slow breath. I've changed my will. I've closed the trust fund. I've pulled my name off every account that might ever help you. Not to hurt you, to free myself. Because I won't spend the last chapters of my life begging for scraps of kindness from someone I raised to know better. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. I messed up, Mom. I didn't realize. No, I said quietly, you chose not to realize. And now you get to live in that choice. We sat for a while longer. He wiped his face once, then again. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, finally. But I want to do better. Then, do it, I replied. Don't say it. Don't perform it. Live it. Every day. And maybe over time, you'll earn your way back into the life you squandered. And with that, I stood. He did too. This time when he hugged me, it wasn't tight or familiar. It was awkward, hesitant. But maybe that was a start. And maybe it wasn't. Either way, I had spoken my truth. And I didn't speak it to be heard. I spoke it to be done. This morning, I woke up to birdsong and the soft amber light of a sun that asked nothing of me. The kettle whistled gently in my kitchen, small, warm, and cluttered in the way that says someone actually lives there. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat by the window in my favorite old chair, and watched the breeze stir the rosemary on my porch. No one needed me today. And for the first time in years, that didn't feel lonely. It felt free. I spent the afternoon writing letters to the scholarship recipients from the trust fund I had redirected. One girl wrote back last week. Her name is Ania, 17, first-generation college student, wants to be a nurse. She thanked me for believing in someone you've never met. Her words meant more than any toast Dylan ever gave. Later, I dropped off books at the local library and shared banana bread with the staff. They ask about my garden now. I belong somewhere, again, not out of obligation, but connection. My home is modest, my days are simple, but everything around me is mine earned, chosen, protected. There are no calls from Dylan today, no emails, no updates from Amanda. But I'm not waiting anymore. I've let go of the leash I spent 30 years holding, mistaking it for love. Maybe Dylan will grow. Maybe he won't. That's not my work to do anymore. I gave my son the foundation of a good life. I gave him education, safety, warmth, dignity. What he built with that was his choice. And what I build now, with time, energy, and the quiet joy of being seen by myself, is mine. I used to think the only way to be a good mother was to give everything to empty myself out completely. But I was wrong. The best thing I ever gave Dylan was a mother who finally said enough. And as I sip my tea, legs tucked beneath me, sun on my face, I don't regret a single boundary I set. Because peace, real peace, comes not when others change, but when you decide that you are no longer willing to shrink for anyone, not even the ones you love most.